What if I told you that one of the most famous stories in the Bible is not what you think it is? What if the comforting image of a gentle stairway to heaven with benevolent angels gliding up and down is a deliberate misinterpretation? A Sunday school story designed to conceal a truth so profound, so technologically advanced, and so utterly terrifying that it would shatter the foundations of modern faith and science alike. The story is Jacob's ladder, and it was not a dream. It was an encounter with a machine, a gateway, a functioning portal connecting our world to another, and Jacob wasn't dreaming it. He stumbled right into its operational field. Forget everything you've been taught. We are not talking about symbolism or metaphor. We are talking about physics, engineering, and a technology so ancient it predates all known human history. The Bible, when you strip away the layers of translation and theological domestication, is not just a book of laws and parables. It is a logbook, a record of encounters with beings and technologies that defy our modern understanding, and the account in Genesis 28 is one of the most explicit blueprints of this technology ever recorded. Jacob, fleeing for his life, desperate and alone, laid his head upon a stone and witnessed the opening of a wormhole. The angels he saw were not ethereal spirits. They were entities, beings of light and energy, trafficking between dimensions. And the Lord who stood at the top was not a distant, omnipresent deity. He was the gatekeeper, the operator of this celestial highway. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. Jacob's ladder was not a promise of heaven after death. It was a glimpse into the operational mechanics of the cosmos, a stark revelation that we are not alone, and that the pathways between worlds are very, very real. To understand the magnitude of what Jacob witnessed, we must travel back with him. Picture the scene. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a story of grit, fear, and survival. Jacob is a fugitive. He has just deceived his blind, dying father and cheated his violent, brutish brother, Esau, out of his birthright and blessing. Esau, a man described as a skillful hunter, a man of the field, has sworn to kill him. So Jacob flees. He is running from everything he has ever known, heading towards an uncertain future in the land of his relatives in Haran. The sun sets, and he is caught in the wilderness. The text says he came to a certain place and stayed there for the night because the sun had set. He takes one of the stones of the place, puts it under his head, and lies down to sleep. This is not a man in a peaceful state of mind, ready for divine revelation. This is a man exhausted, anxious, sleeping on a rock in the middle of nowhere. It is precisely in this state of extremity, in this liminal space between the world he knew and the world he is running to, that the veil thins. And then it begins. Genesis 28, verse 12. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Let's stop right there. The first and most critical error in our understanding comes from the translation of a single Hebrew word, sullam. We read it as ladder. We picture a simple wooden structure, like one you'd use to climb a tree, but this is a profound mistranslation. The word sullam appears only once in the entire Bible right here. Its root, totsalol, means something far more significant. It means to cast up, to build up, to raise a highway or a mound. It implies an engineered structure, a causeway, a massive ramp or embankment. Think of the colossal ramps the Egyptians may have used to build the pyramids. This is not a delicate ladder. It is a piece of heavy-duty infrastructure. It was font, fixed or stationed on the earth. This language denotes stability, physical presence, and technological design. It wasn't floating ethereally. It was grounded, anchored to our physical plane, and its top reached the heavens. This word doesn't just mean the sky we see. In ancient cosmology, the Sochamayim Sot were the celestial realms, the abode of the gods, other dimensions. So what Jacob is seeing is a constructed highway, a physical ramp, originating on earth and terminating in another dimension. Now let's look at the traffic on this highway. The angels of God ascending and descending. The Hebrew word is malakim. This is almost always translated as angels, conjuring images of winged humanoids in white robes. But the core meaning of Sadmalak is simply messenger or emissary. It describes a function, not a species. These were beings on a mission, and notice the order, ascending and descending. Tautalim viordim dot. This implies a continuous two-way flow of traffic. It is not a random, beautiful vision. It is a bustling hub, a port. Imagine watching a modern airport, with planes taking off and landing in an organized, ceaseless pattern. That is the energy of this verse. These beings were not leisurely floating, they were commuting. They were using this sullam tight, this constructed causeway, to move between realms. What would a man from the Bronze Age call a beam of light, a column of energy, or a shimmering vortex through which beings of light traveled? He would use the closest vocabulary he had, a sullam dot, a causeway, a ramp. He was describing a stable wormhole, a fixed Stargate. The stone he laid his head upon wasn't just a random rock. Jacob was at a place called Luz, but after this event, he renames it. He calls it Bethel, the house of God. Why? Because of what he sees and what he concludes. He awakes from his sleep, or perhaps we should call it a state of altered consciousness induced by the energy of the location, and he is terrified. This is not the peaceful awe of a pleasant dream. Genesis 28:17 says, "He was afraid and said, 'How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven.'" Let's dissect that statement. How awesome, or more accurately, how dreadful, how terrifying is this place? The Hebrew is batmanoraha, makumha, zedot. Tatnora comes from the root diautia, which means fear, terror, reverence. Jacob is shaking. His reaction is one of primal fear mixed with profound awe. This was not a comforting vision. It was overwhelming, powerful, and dangerous. Then he identifies the location. He doesn't say, "I had a wonderful dream." He says, "This place is the house of God." He recognizes that the phenomenon is tied to the physical location itself. Luz was special. It was a nexus point, a place where the barrier between our world and the Suchamayim thought was thin, or perhaps where a piece of technology was installed that could breach that barrier. And then the most telling phrase of all, "This is the Fotchar Hashamayim Vot," the gate of heaven. He doesn't say it is bunt like Sata gate. He says it tautat the gate. A Jatshar taunt is an entryway, a city gate, a portal. He identified the structure and the location for what it was, a functional operational doorway into another dimension. Jacob's next actions are not those of a man who just had a nice dream. They are the actions of someone trying to mark and consecrate a site of immense power. He takes the stone he used as a pillow, sets it up as a pillar, and pours oil on it. This is a ritual act. Anointing a stone. Why, in the ancient world, standing stones or pillars were used to mark sacred sites, tombs, or places of covenant. But it could be more. Pouring oil, a precious fuel and liquid, could be seen as an attempt to interact with the object, to offer something to the power residing there. Or, in a more technological sense, was he marking a control stone, activating a beacon? He is claiming the site, or at least acknowledging its power, and making a deal with the entity in charge. He vows that if God protects him and brings him back, then this stone, which I have set up for a pillar, shall be God's house. He is entering into a contract with the being he saw at the control point of this dimensional gate. This event cannot be viewed in isolation. To truly grasp its significance, we must see it as part of a larger pattern woven throughout the fabric of forbidden scripture. The Bible and related texts, like the Book of Enoch, are filled with accounts of these portals, these moments where the mundane world is breached by the extraordinary. Jacob stumbled upon a stationary gate, but others encountered mobile versions of this same technology. Let us turn to the prophet Ezekiel. What he saw was not a fixed ladder, but a vehicle, a trans-dimensional craft that descended from the heavens. Ezekiel 1 describes a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were, gleaming metal. Out of this fiery, metallic cloud came 4 living creatures. These were not the chubby cherubs of Renaissance art. They were bizarre, terrifying beings, each with 4 faces, a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle. They had legs like a man, but feet like a calf, gleaming like burnished bronze. They moved like lightning. This is not the language of spiritual metaphor. It is the desperate attempt of a human being to describe highly advanced, non-human entities and their conveyance. And then Ezekiel describes the machine itself. Wheels within wheels, Tantofen Bartofand. He says the rims of the wheels were high and awesome, and they were full of ease all around. What could ease mean to an ancient man looking at, say, a series of blinking lights, sensors, or glowing energy ports on a rotating gyroscopic structure? The sound of their movement was like the sound of many waters, like the sound of the Almighty, a sound of tumult like the sound of an army. When this craft moved, the beings moved with it. When it stopped, they stopped. Over their heads was an expanse, gleaming like awe-inspiring crystal. And above that expanse was a throne, and on that throne a figure of a man, but he was made of a substance described as kontashmiltot in Hebrew, a word often translated as gleaming amber or electrum, a glowing, metallic substance. This being was surrounded by a radiance like a rainbow. Ezekiel falls on his face in terror, just as Jacob did. Was this God himself in a flying chariot? Or was it a commander of a powerful race, operating a sophisticated vehicle, a Sot Makabakot as the mystics would later call it? The parallels are striking. Or inspiring terror, a portal or vehicle, non-human beings, a commander figure. Ezekiel's vision is Jacob's ladder made mobile. It is the gate coming to the prophet, rather than the prophet stumbling upon the gate. Now, let us journey to an even more forbidden text, one that was deliberately excluded from most canonical Bibles, perhaps because its descriptions were too explicit, too difficult to domesticate, the Book of Enoch. Enoch, a man who walked with God, and then was no more for God took him, is said to have been given a grand tour of the cosmos. He didn't dream it. He was physically taken. The book describes his ascent through multiple heavens or dimensions, guided by angels. In Enoch 14, he describes being brought to a structure built of crystal stones, its walls and floor made of crystal, its ceiling a tapestry of moving stars and lightning. He sees a second house, more magnificent than the first, its portal blazing with fire. Inside, on a high throne of crystal, sits the great glory. The language is one of architecture, of structures, portals, and transportation. Enoch is not just seeing things, he is traveling through them. In chapter 71, he describes being lifted up and taken to the portals of heaven. He is shown the mechanics of the cosmos, the storerooms of the winds, the celestial orbits, all managed by angelic beings. This is not theology, it is cosmology and logistics. Enoch's entire narrative is that of an ancient astronaut, a human taken aboard a vessel or through a series of stargates to witness the vastness of creation and its governors. These portals of heaven, he passes through sound exactly like what Jacob saw, the Vachar Hashemayim Sat, the gate of heaven. The pattern continues. Consider the ascension of the prophet Elijah. He doesn't die a normal death. 2 Kings, chapter 2, describes it vividly. As Elijah and his successor Elisha are walking, behold, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire that separated the 2 of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. Again, we see the elements, fire, a vehicle, Otrekev Tot, and a powerful force, Gatserasant, a whirlwind or tempest that facilitates a physical transition from earth to the Dutchamayim Dant. Elijah is extracted, he is taken. It's a pickup. Like Enoch, he bypasses death and is transported to another realm. What is this chariot of fire, if not another type of trans-dimensional vehicle, akin to Ezekiel's fiery wheel? Even the grand event at Mount Sinai fits this pattern. When the Lord descends to give Moses the 10 Commandments, the description is not of a gentle spiritual presence. It is of a massive, terrifying, and dangerous event. Exodus 19 describes thunder and lightning and a thick cloud on the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. The mountain was wrapped in smoke because the Lord had descended on it in fire, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. The people are commanded to stay away, to set a boundary around the mountain. Anyone who even touches the mountain will be put to death. Why? Is it because of a concept of abstract holiness? Or is it a quarantine protocol? Are they being warned away from a site of immense energy discharge, radiation, or some other physical danger associated with a landed craft or an opened, high-energy portal? The loud trumpet blast that grows louder and louder sounds less like a musical instrument and more like the rising sound of a powerful engine or energy source. Moses goes up into the fire and the cloud, just as Enoch went through the fiery portals. He enters the zone of contact. Sinai, like Bethel, became a temporary house of God, a place where the veil was not just thin, but torn open by a massive application of power and technology. So we have a recurring motif: Jacob's fixed portal at Bethel, Ezekiel's mobile portal, craft, Elijah's extraction vehicle, Enoch's guided tour through dimensional gates, and the mass contact event at Sinai's temporary portal. These are not isolated, metaphorical stories. They are different facets of the same core truth, describing a technology of travel and communication between our physical world and other realms of existence. A technology operated by beings the ancients called Malakim or Selohim Sot. The question then becomes, who are these beings, and what is the purpose of this technology? For that we must delve deeper into the shadows of Genesis and the lore of the Watchers. Genesis 6 speaks of a time when the sons of God, the Sotne Halohim Dat, saw the daughters of men, that they were attractive, and they took wives for themselves. Their offspring were the Nephilim, the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. This brief, cryptic passage is a gloss over a much larger, more detailed story, a story fleshed out in the book of Enoch. Enoch tells us that these sons of God were a specific group of 200 angels, or watchers, led by a figure named Samiaza. They descended to earth on Mount Hermon, having made a pact to interfere with humanity. They taught mankind forbidden knowledge, metallurgy, weapon making, sorcery, astronomy, cosmetics. They fundamentally altered the course of human development. But how did they descend? The verb itself implies a journey from a higher realm to a lower one. They came through the gates. They used the same portal system that Jacob later witnessed. Perhaps that sullam was part of an infrastructure they themselves had built, or one that they were tasked with guarding. These watchers were not benevolent guides, they were rogue agents, corrupting their mission. The Great Flood, in this context, can be seen not just as a punishment for human sin, but as a cosmic cleansing, an attempt to wipe the slate clean of the genetic and technological contamination brought by the Watchers and their Nephilim offspring. What if Jacob's ladder was a remnant of this pre-diluvian network? A still, active portal from an age of gods and monsters that was supposed to have been wiped away. Jacob, in his flight, stumbles upon one of these ancient sites, a place where the energy signature was still strong enough to activate the gate, or perhaps it was in use that very night. The angels he saw ascending and descending could have been loyalist Malakim, still using the network for its intended purpose: observation, administration, and travel between realms. They were the celestial civil service, the messengers and functionaries of the cosmos, going about their business, the Lord standing Tontalav pot above it, or beside him. Was the being in charge of this specific outpost, this Beth El taught. When he speaks to Jacob, it is a moment of contact, a powerful being noticing a local, an indigenous life form who has somehow perceived the invisible structure. He then makes a covenant with this human, incorporating him and his descendants into a cosmic plan. The promise of land and descendants becomes something more than a tribal blessing. It becomes a promise of inheritance, of being brought into the fold of a much larger, galactic or dimensional community. This interpretation also aligns with the esoteric traditions of Jewish mysticism, particularly Kabbalah. The Kabbalistic tree of life is a map of 10 divine emanations, or Bant Sephirot Tant, connected by 22 paths. It is seen as the blueprint of creation, a diagram of the descent of divine energy into the material world. Mystics have long equated Jacob's ladder with this tree of life. The ascent up the ladder is the spiritual journey of the soul back to the divine source, passing through different levels of consciousness and reality. But what if the Kabbalists were not just describing a spiritual metaphor? What if they had preserved a secret technical understanding? What if the tree of life is not just a diagram of spiritual states, but a schematic of dimensional physics, a map of the universe? Each such sephirot represents a different dimension or reality plane, and the paths are the connections, the traversable wormholes between them. The mystic who meditates on the tree is not just purifying their soul, they are learning the navigation charts of the cosmos. Jacob did not meditate his way up the ladder, he saw the physical manifestation of one of its pathways. He saw the sullam that connects our realm, Tat Malkuth Tat, the kingdom, to the higher realms like Gachisod Dat, the foundation, and Tiferet Time Beauty, or harmony. He was standing at the base of a literal tree of life, a technology that structures reality itself. Think about the implications. Sacred sites across the world, Stonehenge, the Giza Plateau, Machu Picchu, and yes, the location of Bethel in Israel, have long been associated with strange energies, anomalies, and spiritual phenomena. Ancient cultures consistently built their most important structures on what we now call ley lines or places of powerful telluric energy. Why? Were they merely superstitious? Or were they acting on a forgotten science, an inherited knowledge that these specific locations on Earth were natural nexus points, places where the membrane between dimensions is unusually thin and permeable? Were they building their temples and stone circles, not just for worship, but as amplifiers, as antennae, attempting to piggyback on the natural energies of the earth, to reopen the gates, to call down the gods who had once walked among them? Jacob's act of setting up a stone pillar at Bethel is echoed in the megalithic cultures of the world, all of whom seemed obsessed with erecting massive stones aligned to celestial events. They were all, in their own way, trying to recreate what Jacob saw. They were trying to build a new house of God, a new Totshah Hashemayim Dot. So where does this leave us? We have a new picture of Jacob's encounter. He is not a passive dreamer. He is an active witness to a phenomenal event. He discovers a fixed operational portal, sullam Dot, a causeway linking Earth to other dimensions, Shamayim. He sees beings, Batmalakim Sat, using it as a transport hub. He is terrified, Attanora Sat, by the power and reality of the site. He identifies it as a gate Shachar Tot. He interacts with the commander or gatekeeper, Bantadananai. He marks the site and enters into a contract, a covenant. This reading aligns perfectly with other high-strangeness events in the Bible. Ezekiel's wheel, Elijah's chariot, Enoch's tours, and the Sinai event. It paints a picture of our world as being part of a much larger, populated, and technologically sophisticated cosmic community. It suggests that what we call God and angels in the Bible are often descriptions of powerful non-human entities, and their advanced technologies for interdimensional travel. This is the forbidden knowledge that has been systematically suppressed and reinterpreted over millennia. It is easier, safer, to believe in a simple dream. A symbolic ladder, it requires less of us. It keeps our worldview small and manageable. But a physical gate, a real portal, implies that the universe is infinitely more complex, and that humanity's place in it is far from unique. It means that history is not what we have been told, and the future could be stranger than we can imagine. Are these gates still active? Are there other Sat Beth, El Sat scattered across the globe, dormant or hidden? When people report UFOs, strange lights in the sky, or encounters with otherworldly beings, are they having new Tanbeth, El Dront experience? Are they stumbling like Jacob upon the operations of this ancient hidden network? Perhaps the most profound piece of this puzzle comes from the New Testament, from the mouth of Jesus Christ himself. In the Gospel of John, shortly after calling his disciple Nathanael, Jesus says something extraordinary. He looks at Nathanael and says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, You will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. This is a direct, unmistakable reference to Jacob's vision. But with one paradigm-shattering twist. Jesus is not pointing to a location. He is not saying, "You will see a ladder." He is replacing the sullam, the technological causeway, with himself. He is claiming to be the portal. He is the living gateway, the organic connection between the human and the divine, the bridge between earth and the John Shemayim Sant. He is the ultimate fulfillment of the mystery of Bethel. The house of God is no longer a place of stone. It is a person of flesh and blood. The gate is no longer a piece of ancient infrastructure. It is consciousness itself, embodied in the figure who claimed to be the way, the truth, and the life. This is the final evolution of the concept. The technology becomes biology. The machine becomes a man. The path of stone and light becomes a path of faith and spirit. But this ultimate spiritual truth does not negate the physical reality of what Jacob saw. It builds upon it. It shows a progression. The universe is threaded with these connections, these pathways between worlds. For a time, they may have been technological, physical structures, remnants of a forgotten age of cosmic interaction. But the ultimate plan, the final message, was that this connection could be internalized. The human being himself could become the sullam, the living ladder capable of ascending to the highest realms of consciousness. The journey without becomes the journey within. Yet, the memory of the external gates remains, coded into our most sacred texts, waiting for an age with eyes to see and ears to hear. Waiting for us to realize that the story of Jacob's ladder was never just a comforting tale for a child's bedtime. It was a map, a warning, and an invitation. A revelation that the cosmos is a house of many mansions, and there are, and always have been, doors between the rooms. The next time you read the Bible, read it with new eyes. Look for the patterns, the descriptions of fire, of gleaming metal, of terrifying speed, of beings that defy simple categorization. Look for the fear and awe in the witnesses. You will find that the evidence has been there all along. The Bible is not just a book about God. It is a book about us, and our place in a universe that is far more crowded, complex and magnificent than we have ever allowed ourselves to believe. The veil between worlds is thin, and sometimes for a fugitive sleeping on a stone, for a prophet by a river, it rips wide open. Jacob's dream wasn't a dream. It was a look behind the curtain, and what he saw changes everything.